Hey y'all, just waiting for a few more people to get in here. Give me a couple of minutes. What's up, Lisa? Like my starting lineup right here. Yeah, I always come through. I hope you got some questions ready for me though, because I'm about to go in. I think so anyway. I feel ready for it. All right, here we go. All right, so for the first point, tonight's topic, before I even get started talking about what we're going to be talking about. Tonight's topic is about why childhood trauma plays a major part in adult dysfunction. I feel like that is a huge point that we need to consider, right? So childhood trauma is one of those things that if left unresolved, it will force us to become adults that are literally not able to function as adults because we're stuck in this childlike state. So by being stuck in this childlike state, it simply means that instead of us being able to act like adults, where we handle ourselves in adults like adult like fashion, we're limited to the things that we do. So our limitations come from the fact that we're not able to think above our norm or think outside of our norm. So this now becomes our sudden reality. So I just think with this topic tonight is like a huge transition. I know last night we were talking about why it's important to have men as leaders, but I think this topic also kind of speaks on that why men possibly cannot be leaders, right? If you're someone that has childhood trauma, you really don't know how to build yourself up in that way because oftentimes if everyone else around you has the same issue, you're starting to think it's normal. You're starting to think it's okay, or you're starting to think that it's not that big of a deal. And of course, if people are making a big deal out of it, then maybe it's their issue, not yours, right? All right. So for the first point, I want to say that's going to be what can we learn about childhood trauma. I want to say that what we can learn about childhood trauma is just simply the fact that if it goes unnoticed for so long, it now becomes our reality. We don't ever think that we need to challenge it because it's just so much of what we do. This is why I think it's important that if you're raising children, you make sure that you have children in a safe environment. Like you don't want to have children growing up in an environment that you grew up in because you know that the effects of it won't always be the best. Like look at what happened to ourselves. And from that, it just kind of puts you in a place where you know that in order to do something different, it starts by how you're able to influence their lives and how you're able to give them something different. That's one key point that I look at as it relates to raising children because I feel like so much of what we're doing is simply just allowing our children just to experience life the same way that we did. But how's that fair for them? You know, just because we were able to make it out alive doesn't mean that most kids will. And I think that, you know, as we start to get older and as we start to become more conscious of what's happening around us, we have to be more involved. By being more involved, you can actually help eliminate a lot of the dangers that children are facing. Like I read a little report today. A child, I didn't even read the whole thing because it was just so sad, but 10-year-old child was being bullied at school and the bullies convinced him to kill himself. So guess what he did? He killed himself. My heart goes out to that little boy because it's like, how are you left so unprotected? You can't even have conversations with people about what's going on around you because maybe they don't take it serious, or maybe it's just not that deep. Like a lot of us were teased as kids, so as we become adults, we tend to think that oh well, kids can handle it, kids can go through whatever. It's not the same, you know. I just see it as it's something that we have to always be mindful of, because today's children or today's society is so much different. Like, it's not easy for us to just expect them to be able to work themselves through whatever they're going through. They don't have the means. And nowadays everything's so social media driven. It's like, oh well, okay, if I'm not getting the results I want, we know it's the best thing, right? So that's how I see that, right? So let's get to this next point. Thank you for whoever's there. I'm not sure who that is, but I thank you for joining in. All right, one moment. So the next one I have is childhood trauma hereditary? Um, I thought about this today as I made these little questions, but I don't think it is. I think that we can actually eliminate it. Now, it starts with our ability to make that difference, because once we make that difference, we can kind of help give them that chance to fix whatever mistakes are happening. This is why I always say that as parents, if we're not doing our job to protect our kids or to give them what it is they need, we're failing them. No way around it. We're failing them. And we're failing them so much that, we're not able to properly give them the tools for success. I know it sounds crazy, but a lot of parents criticize their kids. They criticize their kids because their kids can't be the best versions of what their parents want them to be. And by that happening, um, it's just one of those things that makes them, I don't even know if it's a bad feeling or if it's just like something of being inadequate. Like they're not being able to give the children all that they should have. And because of it, it kind of just makes it a bit of a discomfort for the children. I know for me, growing up as a kid, having that experience of being able to, live up to my mother's expectations or standards really didn't give me the best results. Like, I always felt like I had I'm trying to think of the word. I always felt like I had a chip on my shoulder. Like, I always had something to prove. Like, oh, well, I don't want to disappoint my mom and I don't want to make my mom feel bad. So I got to do all these things just to make sure I please her. But in reality, where did that leave me? It's almost traumatic, because it's like, even though you're not set up for the best results, you're not set up to do the work that you're intended to do, it doesn't really matter. You're forced to make sure that everybody else gets their needs met while you're just left to ignore it. So that's why I think that it's important that we consider those aspects as well too, because we think that childhood trauma can be hereditary, but I mean, with us doing the self work, or with us doing the needed work to accomplish those things, we can actually make it happen. So let me get to the next point. I don't have anybody here, and I'm sorry. I set a time, but I actually, had to do it early because I'm about to go to sleep. I'm tired. I've been at work since like 9 o'clock. Got home at like 5. I'm not cut out for that fast life anymore, man. But for the third point I have, can childhood trauma prevent you from getting into a serious relationship? I want to say it can, because if you have certain aspects of that trauma that hasn't been healed, whether it's through molestation, abuse, um, manipulation, you're not always able to get into a successful relationship, because now you're forcing yourself to think outside of what you've experienced, and somehow, some way, thinking that, well, maybe if I ignore them or if I act like it doesn't exist, maybe it'll be easier. It doesn't always get easy. And I feel like those things resurface so much because a lot of the times we're safe, or we're forced to encounter our triggers. And I think that when we don't do the work to resolve those issues, they always show up in different forms. This is why you see so many people can be with someone for X amount of years, and suddenly they just snap, because they're not able to handle that. That pressure forces them to crack. Like, they're now forced to think outside the box. They're now forced to step up their game and have to elevate, but there's that constant reminder of what has happened and what they've experienced. So this is why it becomes like an issue for them, because they're always fighting a battle. They're always trying to force themselves to see how can they overcome what they've experienced and what can they gain from it in the process without having to lose who they are. And this is why I always say that if you're with someone and you're going through some type of hardship, It's okay to go through hardships because we know life's not perfect. But the moment you're losing yourself in that process, that's telling you everything you need to know about what you're doing. Maybe you need to pull away. Maybe you need to pull back. Maybe you need to reconsider what's happening. You know, when we don't reconsider what's happening and we're constantly giving ourselves the chance to ignore our needs, it's like we're constantly telling ourselves whatever it is we're dealing with isn't important. Or I can give myself a pass this time, or I can allow it to be overlooked this time. It's not that serious. Oh, I can just act like it doesn't exist. But by doing that, it's like you're teaching yourself again another means of coping. I know that I don't have to worry about it being any type of negative effect because I know that once that happens, I can get everything else that I expect to achieve from it. And to me, that's not success. That's a setup. That's the setup. So let me get to the next point. All right. So for the next point, I have what are some ways to recognize childhood trauma? I would say some ways to recognize childhood trauma to me starts from just knowing exactly what type of things you've gone through as a child, how they have affected your life as a child, and what they have done to get you to a place of discomfort, right? So, especially for the discomfort part, a lot of the things that we've experienced as children, for most of us, they're kind of regress. So, we put them into our memory banks with the hopes of forgetting about them and acting like they never exist. But by doing that, that just simply means that when they do come up again, we have to do more, even more work because now we're in a completely different space. We're no longer children. For those of us that had, traumatic effects as children, and now as adults, you have to do double the work because if you don't handle it now, or if you don't handle it when you're supposed to handle it, they always resurface. Now, it may not be that they're resurfacing through you, but they may resurface through your children. They may resurface through, different people you encounter. And by having that experience, it's basically teaching you that, if you're not able to relive it, you're not able to solve it, it's going to be something that eventually, when it does come time for you to handle it, you're not going to be able to get it to where it needs to be. No worries, Marjorie. You're good. I'm definitely going to have to redo this again. I mean, I've been talking to myself for a little bit. No worries. Yeah. So I just think that as it relates to that, recognizing the childhood trauma, we have to do our part. Like, I know that a lot of the things we've gone through, we can't always control them. And sometimes it's tough. Like, you know, as kids, we don't always ask to be given this opportunity or to be faced with the things that we're faced with. But, now that it's here, now that it's a part of what we're doing, now that it's a part of our everyday, we have to be aware of it. And by being aware, it just simply means that you are able to recognize all of the effects of it, whether it's the good, the bad, or the ugly. And this is why I always say that you have to get in touch with your inner child because your inner child would allow you to be able to get to a place where none of those things matter. Now you're able to solve it because you see the effects. You have a child and your child is watching after you, so you want to make sure you give your child everything your child needs. And it starts simply by how you're able to handle it, right? So for my last point, I have why it's important to know what triggers your trauma. So I want to say that it's important because when you recognize what triggers your trauma, you kind of know like what situations to avoid. And I know that as things come up, we don't always have a good sense of judgment to know how to avoid them. But for example, if you know that it's something that, every time you get around this one family member, they always try to make you feel bad because you're not living up to their standards. Maybe you can avoid them. Maybe you can put yourself in a space where you're not necessarily by yourself with them. Or maybe you know that they only do that when there's other family members around and they want to make you feel bad. They're trying to embarrass you or they're trying to show you like, okay, well, you're not able to live up to my standards. So this is what you need to do. And this is what's going on. I have no problem cutting people off. I feel like if you need to cut people off for the betterment of your life, then you just have to do it. Like, that's what life's all about. Life is all about putting yourself in the best position possible to get what you need. I don't care what it is. You look at jobs, you look at, relationships, friendships, anything. It's all about putting yourself in the best space. And that's where it starts. If we don't do that, we're essentially teaching ourselves that it's not important. Whatever it is that we're expecting to get out of life, oh, we'll just manage through it and we'll just somehow figure it out. But it doesn't work like that. But when you know your triggers, then you can kind of say, okay, well, this is how I'm going to handle it today. This is what I'm going to do to, bring some type of effectiveness to my life. Because if I'm constantly expecting that when I get surrounded by that trauma or that negativity, that it's going to work that way, it won't. And this is why I keep saying, like, so many people fail because they're busy trying to act like these things don't exist. And because they are a constant in their lives, they're not going to be able to get where they need to get. So I definitely think that, like, with this conversation I had today, I mean, I know a lot of people didn't really show up that I told about it, but I mean, I would hope that as you guys are watching the replay, that you're able to see, when you know exactly how your childhood trauma plays into your adulthood, you are going to do everything you can, whether it takes solving those issues and trying to come up with a different reality or reaction towards those issues, or just knowing that you're going to do something different. If we have kids, it all starts with how we raise our kids, because a lot of our parents didn't know. They raised us just the way that their parents raised them. And now look at the effects. You have like 2 damaged generations because people don't know how to do what's needed. Maybe even 3, you know? I mean, I know everyone wants to do what's right and everyone wants to be able to, give their family the best thing that they've ever had, but it all starts with being able to raise our kids effectively. Another reason why I always say that when we're dating, we're not just dating for ourselves anymore. We have to date for our kids as well, because when you're dating for your kids will show you everything that you need. If I'm dealing with a woman that doesn't have a father figure for her child, clearly her child is going to long for that, because her child is going to want to come to a place of understanding, based on the fact that mommy couldn't make it work with daddy, but I'm expecting mommy to be able to have somebody there that can fill in for daddy. Not to say that they're my father, but just the fact that they can provide some type of fatherly presence. That's huge for children. Children need to have that. Same thing for a father. If a father doesn't have the mother around and the father's the only one doing it, he's definitely going to need that motherly love for the children. Because it's just something that he can't always provide. And knowing that he has a woman there would definitely make it easier for him. And this is why I keep saying, like, all of our moves have to be cognizant on the fact that we have our childhood trauma in effect. And by having our childhood trauma in effect, we can't fix it in the ways that we've been doing, but we have to find something different that's going to give us some type of satisfaction knowing that we've accomplished it. So, do you guys have anything that you want to add? I know this is like spur of the moment, and I had to do it a little bit early because, like I said earlier, I'm about to crash. I feel it. But if y'all don't have anything, I'll give y'all like another minute. But yeah. So Marjorie says, my son has always says he doesn't want a father figure anymore. Does he say why? I think we spoke about that before too. It's kind of, I don't want to say weird, but maybe in his mind, like, he doesn't want no one to step up to be what his father is. A lot of boys, especially, they feel like their fathers can't be replaced. And I'm not saying that the person that you are interacting with has to replace his father, but at the same time, he has to be aware that mommy needs love too. Mommy has to be able to give you what you deserve to have and what she deserves to have, because mommy needs love. You know, I can't imagine. So she says he only wants his father, not a replacement. Okay. So does that mean that he just wants you to stay miserable or stay uncomfortable? Sorry. I mean, I'm just trying to understand, because I feel like, again, especially with boys, they get so jealous. Like, they don't want no one to interact with their mothers. And I'm just like, your mom still has to have a life. Like, regardless of how you feel, your mom has to be happy. If your parents are separated, I'm pretty sure for those cases, it's like the father has moved on. The father says, see, he says, I can date after he leaves. That doesn't make sense to me. Like, that's a bit bothersome, because I mean, regardless of anything, I think that he deserves to see you operating at a higher level. And if you're not operating at that higher level by yourself, you deserve to have that through the love of a man. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. To me, I think that that's important too, because now that gives him the opportunity to see you in a better space. Because if you're just dealing with yourself and you're not all the way there because of whatever you have going on, no knock on you, but maybe that's an additional boost. That's an extra crutch. One less thing you have to worry about. And like I always say, women are left to figure all this shit out while men just get to go off and it's like nothing ever happens. But why is that okay? Maybe you should ask him that. Like, does he think that it's normal for you to be able to sit here and do all these things alone while, you are missing out on the best years of your life because you can't date until he leaves? What? That's crazy. I wish my child would tell me that. But that's a good point, though. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, you don't have to hide it. And even if he does know about it, he'll be all right. He's your son, not your boyfriend. You don't got to hide nothing from him. You're paying the bills. You're making things work for him, not the other way around. So I wouldn't even worry about that. For me, I would just laugh and keep it moving. I mean, I'm not saying that if you do decide to bring someone around, he has to be disrespectful, but he still has to be respectful and mindful of the fact that mommy needs love too. Mommy has to find her happiness just as much as daddy does, because I'm sure his father has moved on, and he's not telling his father, "I don't want a mother replacement." No, because his father's going to do it anyway. And there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone needs love. Everyone needs to feel valued, wanted, appreciated, all of that stuff. But how can a child take that away from their parent? That doesn't make sense. It's kind of selfish too. It's almost like saying he wants all of your love for yourself, or sorry, for himself, and he doesn't want you to be happy. I don't agree. But I thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. I'll put this back up again, and yeah, I'll think of something else tomorrow night, possibly. I don't know. Let's see how tomorrow goes. But thank you for joining in. You guys have a good night. All right? Take care.